In my correspondence with people who know more about trades than I do because they've executed them, I asked what the return would be in a Jaire Alexander trade. One of them said, not good. To which I said, well, what do you mean? Like 6th round pick? Maybe not even that. Now, a second person, I said, hey, this is what so-and-so said. What do you think? Oh, I think they would get more. I think he can still play. So that was opinion number 3 or 2. Opinion number 3 was I would ask for a 3rd and then settle for a 4th or a 5th. Of those 3 opinions, which one closely matches yours best? And knowing that Goody wants extra picks, knowing that you can get, say for a 5th round pick, a Corey Linsley, a 𝙒𝘼𝙐𝘾𝙃. That for a 5th round pick you can get a Dontayvion Wicks. That for a 4th round pick you can get a Zach Tom or a Romeo Doubs or a TJ Lang or a Josh Sitton or a Mike Daniels. Are you willing? How low will you go before you say it's not worth it? We'll just keep him and cross our fingers and hope. But I don't think they can do that either because I think they're going to want to get his contract number down. Where do you stand on this?
I think if you can trade him for something with some conditions is where I think this thing ends up going. And whether that starts as a sixth, and if it gets down to he plays a certain amount of snaps, you can get it all the way up to a 3rd. If they win a Super Bowl with him and he starts, that's great. If you end up getting a 4th or a 5th out of this, and I know, other folks on Twitter have said, well, Stephon Gilmore got this, and what's-his-face, Lattimore got a bunch of stuff with Washington, gave up a bunch to New Orleans. All true. Just different scenario here. And it's more when there's some desperation and you get in the middle of the season and you feel like you're a championship team. The offseason's a little bit different. There's more options. There's more things on the horizon. So you could sit and wait. It's not what Green Bay is going to do. And I think if they get something with a baseline where they're getting a pick and then there's some conditions, then you wouldn't get the pick until next year. And that's that trade-off you have to have.
True.
I think if you get a
Good
5th
point.
or a 6th, if you get a 5th, anything above a 5th, Goody bludgeoned somebody. If you get a 5th, I think that's about where if you feel like Jaire can play and you can get a new deal done with him, it's worth the risk on your end. And I think from Green Bay, you feel like we're getting another pick. Hopefully we can turn that pick into another Linsley, Sitton, TJ type deal. And if you get that, you feel pretty good about it. But the big thing is you're moving on. And I think, even though yesterday I still am sitting here saying, just remember, not saying Jaire's back, just remember there's all these other things. But I just think, and it's not bad blood, I think there's just, it's time. I think there's time where it's better for all parties to try and figure that piece out. And that's why I think he'll be gone. And I think it'll be, if you get anywhere in a mid-round, I think you'd feel pretty good about it from Green Bay's standpoint.
All right, so I agree with everything you said there. Now, the follow-up question, though, is this. It only takes one team, and that's what I wrote in my story at channel3000.com, right? It only takes one team that is desperate enough at the position and has the extra trade capital and is willing to take the risk to get something good for them. There's 31 other teams. Somebody might feel that way. I mentioned Carolina because he's from Charlotte originally. Maybe they need a corner. Maybe that works out.
He was a captain there.
Yes, self-appointed. But as one of the executives said, he's a weird dude. How much does that weigh if you are the GM of not the Packers, but of one of the other teams that is interested, and does that make you want to try and drive the price tag for compensation down because it gives you pause because you don't know who the guy is that you're going to get. You're going to get the guy that was a second-team All-Pro in 2020 and 2022, or are you going to get the guy where there were people in his own building wondering if he could have been playing at some point last year and wasn't?
I don't think the price tag is going to get to the point where you have to drive it down. Do I feel like there's going to be 5 teams clamoring? I know there's reports that all these teams wanted to get in the mix. I don't know what sourcing that is. I don't know how accurate it is. That could just be people throwing balloons up. The bottom line is if there's somebody that wants to go get Jaire, they can go get him. And from Green Bay's standpoint, you hope there are 2 or 3 teams. But this idea, well, we're gonna throw out a smear campaign to get it. You don't need to do that because he hasn't played. He hasn't been consistent enough. So you either say, I believe he can still play and I want him on our team. Go give up. I would bet right now if you went to Goody down in Indy and said, we'll give you a 4th for him, that paperwork would be dip, and boom.
Right. You're right.
Now, you're not going to want to do that. You're going to want to obviously give up the least amount you can. And I think that that's what's going to end up happening. There'll be a few teams that will be willing to take a flyer on Jaire, but this concept of he's a number 1 corner, we're going to have to pay him this, and there's going to be all this extra Lattimore-type comp, I don't see it. That doesn't mean there can't be one crazy team. I mean, who would have thought 𝙒𝘖𝙐𝙺 would get traded?
Correct.
At this point, every time you think something, just say 𝙒𝘖𝙺. And when you say that, you're like, well, crazy stuff happens. And maybe you call somebody and say, hey, we want a 1st for Jaire. And they'll say, okay, yeah. 𝙒𝘖𝙺. Oh, 2nd-round pick? Yep, 𝙒𝘖𝙺. And that's what you do. Don't think there's going to be a 𝙒𝘖𝙺 out there, but I don't think the Lakers thought there'd be a 𝙒𝘖𝙺 out there. And there's a 𝙒𝘖𝙺 in L.A.
They did apparently ask for Giannis, so they started with their high asking price as well.
They settled for 𝙒𝘖𝙺.
So last thing, because there was apparently we can get into this later, a confrontation at the Starbucks in the JW Marriott in Indianapolis between Ian Rappaport and Jordan Schultz. Jordan Schultz works for Fox. Ian Rappaport works for the NFL Network. And it was regarding this. Tom Brady went out, golfing or skiing or something with Matthew Stafford in Montana. And there's reasonable question as to whether or not that is tampering because he's a minority owner in the Raiders, and there's talk of the Rams potentially trading Matthew Stafford. And then in what surely felt like a walk that back to try and protect Tom Brady, I'm guessing maybe Don was involved. It was a chance meeting. It was not, whatever. And so apparently Jordan Schultz, who I don't know if he's a good guy, bad guy, whatever. But apparently there was a confrontation there about the way the response to his story was framed. In the case of Jaire's story coming out yesterday, in fact, a subsequent tweet from Ian Rappaport that said that he has a very tradable contract. We know how the game is played, right? Agents use, the exchange of information as part of the transaction. Obviously, even though Goody flat out said, and I use the quote in my story at channel3000.com, that he doesn't give permission to players' agents to seek trades, he acknowledged that agents do it anyway. So the fact that this came from what appears to be the agent's end, Tausch, and that he's trying to drum up interest, does that tell you anything?
You're talking about Jaire, or are you talking about Stafford?
I'm talking about Jaire. I'm using the...
Okay. I thought you were talking about coffee and... Yes, Jaire just wants out. And I think from his perspective, I think the best thing to be is just to get cut. I don't think there's a... I want to be traded to this spot. He wants to get cut, and then he could pick where he goes. Right. And he can pick the structure of what it looks like. There's not any more guarantees on his contract. So... if I'm him, I look at this and say, you know what? My time has come. I am not going to, if you really want to play hardball, and I don't think Jaire is in this spot, you say, I'm not reporting anywhere. Like Gronk. Gronk was traded to the Detroit Lions and said, no, I'm not going there. No.
And we agree that this is what Jaire wants. He does not.
Jaire wants a clean break. He is not interested in
100%.
Green Bay controlling where he goes. Why on earth would he want that? He didn't want to go. Maybe he wants to go to Carolina. He can be a captain. He wants to be able to dictate where he goes and what that contract might look like. And from Green Bay's standpoint, somebody texted me this morning. The best reason to trade him,
John Schneider,
even if you don't get anything, you get a 7th. The best way, because then you keep him out. You keep him away.
Correct.
From the Vikings, Detroit.
Correct.
Bears. So maybe there's a point where and that's why I brought that up yesterday, because Detroit to me would make a lot of sense. A really good team. You want to find a motivating factor for Jaire. There would be nothing more motivating. He's probably very, very, very frustrated about how his tenure in Green Bay ended. So from the Packers standpoint, I don't think they feel that Jaire is great enough that it's going to be some big pendulum swing, whether he goes. But I think in a perfect world, they'll say, you know what? Let's send him off to Siberia, a.k.a. Tennessee, or the Raiders, somewhere where we're not going to see him. It's not as cold. Obviously, Siberia is a lot colder than Vegas/Nashville.
Indeed.
But it's not about the temperature. It's about how the team is and how much of an impact it will have on your bottom line. And if you send Jaire there, it will be, we don't even know what he's doing. If he's in Minneapolis or he's in Detroit, all of a sudden that's going to you're going to get those coals heated up, and it might be worth it from Green Bay standpoint. Listen, oh boy, I don't know who Tennessee's GM is. Hey, oh boy, give us a 7th. Jaire's down for you. You figure it out. And that might be good enough just to control where he goes. I just don't feel like he's at that point where people are going to be that concerned about what he ends up doing.
Yeah, and while I agree with you on the idea of having conditions so it can go up, you kind of answered your own question, too, of that means it's got to be a 2026 pick. And 𝙒𝙀𝙀 was very clear that he wants more picks in this draft. So I would think that would be a motivator for him as well. All right.